The story begins when Mr. He is alone at his house, in Minxiong. He looked nervous and scared, walking slowly out while pointing a gun at someone. The female ghost's voice began to whisper her terror. The woman kept calling the name of her lover who had left her. Apparently, Mr. He has a lover, but he also has a wife and children. Arriving at the gate of the house, Mr. He shot several times while shouting so that the female ghost would not continue to bother him. The gun in his hand suddenly moved towards the man's head. Immediately, a gunshot sounded loudly, killing Tu and He. And the film begins. Dozens of years after the incident, a woman meets a doctor to predict the fate of her son, He Yiming. The woman is Mr. He's legal wife, who is now living as a widow. The doctor said that Mr. He was not a bunder but was killed by a female ghost who still haunts the river near his house. Yiming's destiny is closely related to water. The child must stay away from water sources, be it rivers, wells, ditches, lakes and so on. Once out of sight, Madam He's son's life could be lost along with his mother's. The doctor said that Yiming might not be more than 15 years old. The healer gave Mrs. He the voice recording of Yiming's destiny reading. The woman glared while questioning the fate of her son, who only lived to be 14 years old. The healer could not change fate and asked Mrs. He to take turns with other visitors. The river, which is located beside the Minxiong haunted house, is famous for often claiming lives. Many of them were found dead right on the bank of the canal. The local people believe that this is because the ghost of a vengeful woman still resides there. 30 years have passed. That afternoon, Asa went swimming with his girlfriend Zhao. They were joking while enjoying the sunny day. Afraid that her skin would be striped, Zhao took off the amulet necklace that her grandmother had given her. The necklace went into the trench until it could no longer be found. Zhao swam back to the middle until suddenly her body sank and couldn't come out to the surface. Asa immediately jumped into the pool to save Zhao. Oddly enough, he saw a ghost without a head grabbing Zhao's leg and blocking him from rising to the surface. Asa, who is an indigo, is afraid to see it himself. The pool attendant swiftly helped Zhao from their closest distance. Asa dives again and checks the whereabouts of the stump-headed ghost, who apparently has disappeared. Zhao said that her legs suddenly felt cramped and it was difficult to move. Without realizing it, the amulet necklace her grandmother had given her was still stuck in a ditch submerged in sewage. Elsewhere, Granny is praying in her home shrine while listening to the radio. The news on the radio reported the disappearance of a 60-year-old man who was allegedly swept away by the swift currents of the river. Apart from that, news regarding the fake shaman Ping Wang who opened a practice at his home was also in the spotlight. The shaman forced his female patients to have sex with him. Many followers are cheated and fucked and even lose a lot of money. Not long after, Zhao came home and went straight to her room. Grandma asked her beloved grandson to clean up his grandfather's grave. Zhao didn't heed the grandmother's words and instead lay down in the room. Mother went into her daughter's room to persuade Zhao to do what grandmother said. They walked to the cemetery until Zhao trips and falls. The grandmother immediately grumbled and advised her grandson not to use his cell phone while walking. Grandmother asked Zhao to bring her things while saying that there were no sons in their family, therefore Zhao as the only grandchild had to attend the prayer at grandfather's grave once a year. On the Chengbeng feast, they pray in front of their ancestors, sweep the tomb and offer food, tea, wine, incense, and prayer papers on it as a sign of respect. When grandmother and mother prayed solemnly, Zhao stepped away from the tomb. Elsewhere, Asa, who works to help his uncle wash the body, is taking care of the body of a man who died some time ago. Uncle Asa revealed that a person who has just died, his soul doesn't know where to go. In some haunted places there are souls of dead people who are bound in the earth and can't leave. Asa asked if the spirits would leave if their wish was fulfilled. Uncle confirmed it and gave the bracelet to Asa. In his family, Asa is the heir to his uncle's talent, which can see ghosts and is used to help others. At the same time, Daochi continued walking through the forest and stopped at a small temple surrounded by bamboo trees filled with spell papers. Daochi seemed to be in a daze as she walked over to it and opened the shrine. Suddenly, 13:45:47. An urn containing the ashes of the dead lying there was filled with spell paper. Daochi was stranded unconscious in the middle of the forest, while her mother and grandmother were busy looking for her. The two of them asked local residents who worked in the fields. Unfortunately, none of the residents saw Daochi's whereabouts. Grandmother walked into a grocery store near her house. They reported that many people died in the river near the grandmother's house. Granny rushed to the police station to make the search more speedy and thorough. At that time, Daochi was still possessed, and walked home to the forbidden room on the 3rd floor. Using a butcher knife, the girl smashed the wood that was blocking the door of the forbidden room. He entered the room and took the urn containing the ashes of the dead, which was under the bed. A photo of a woman appears under the urn. Daochi slams the urn filled with the ashes of the dead until the most horrific incident occurs. That evening, Grandpa had just arrived home delivered by a police officer. They had gone around the village looking for Daochi's whereabouts, but they couldn't be found anywhere. Knowing that the car had stopped in front of the magnificent house, the police officer was frightened by himself while saying that the house was known to be haunted and very haunted. Arriving at the house, Granny was very panicked when she found out that her grandson had gone to the 3rd floor. That night the electricity and the home telephone could not be used. Dottie rushes to Gurwei Kai's house for help. The mother named Sengsan was left at home alone to find her wife Daochi. The woman saw Daochi's wardrobe door open and immediately checked the contents. In a flash, the shadow of a person flashed behind his back. Sengsan went up to the 3rd floor while calling his daughter's name. Sengsan walks into the forbidden room and realizes the urn for the ashes has broken. Immediately, writing appeared on the mirror while Sengsan's hair was lifted up by an invisible creature. Sengsan was frightened by himself, especially when he saw a white dress hanging on the bed. The door to the room was locked so that Sengsan could not escape. He pounded as hard as he could until he cried out in fear. At that time, blood started dripping down Sengsan's forehead and made him hide in the cupboard. Not long after, Asa appeared and opened the wardrobe door. Sengsan, who screamed loudly, made Asa fall over in shock. Asa said that Daochi had sent him a message this afternoon to be picked up at home. However, because there was no further news, Asa was determined to enter the house to find Daochi's whereabouts. Sensing said that she was Daochi's biological mother. Asa said that he had a bad feeling about Daochi's situation. He said that Daochi was in grave danger. Instantly the mirror glass in the room exploded and scattered. Lin Sengsan looked at the memory fragments that had happened in the past. They heard Daochi's voice from within the mirror and immediately entered a different realm through the portal. Inside the mirror was the same state of the house in the past dimension. Daochi stood by the well while wearing the white dress that was in the forbidden room. The girl was about to jump into the well but was immediately blocked by the mother. Lin Sengsan ran as fast as lightning to hug his daughter's body, but it was too late. Daochi dives into the well, while Sengsan mourns the loss of her only daughter. Immediately, a demonic hand emerged from the well to strangle Sengsan's neck. Asa rushed to save Sengsan from the devil's noose and hid under the prayer table. The table was thrown out and the god statue fell apart. A ghostly voice kept calling Sengsan's name. The woman went up to the 3rd floor, right where the source of the sound was. Apparently, in that room Sengsan again met Daochi, who threatened to kill him. The girl was pointing the scissors at her own neck while Sengson was holding it as hard as he could. Asa said that Sengson hugged the girl, not Zhao. It turned out that Zhaoqi's figure turned into a statue whose head fell off. Asa hit the mirror in the room hoping to return to his original world. Unfortunately, the world portal in the mirror has closed and can no longer be passed. Sengson heard the sound of someone talking outside the house. It turned out that it was the grandmother who had brought 2 builders to close the well in front of the house. I don't know what happened that night, but my grandmother insisted that the hole in the well be closed that very night. Asa and Sengson can see Granny from the mirror in the human world. Dottie brings Guru Akai to perform the exorcism ritual in the forbidden room. Akai writes a mantra on the back of a woman's photo and asks Dottie to slap her sandals on the photo tightly. The scene returns to the past where Sengson was still in his teens. Sengson is the daughter of the He family, who have a twin named Dexin. They get into an argument where Sengson steals Dexin's necklace, while Dexin destroys Sengson's music box. The dispute between the two of them continued while Grandma was only busy watching Yiming, the only eldest son in the He family. Dexin got hit on the head just because he was about to show a pineapple to his brother Yiming. Not long after, an unfortunate incident befell the family. Yiming was found lifeless on the bank of a river after helping his sister look for flip-flops that were washed away. Afraid of being scolded by his mother, Sengson exchanges Dexin's sandals and slanders that Dexin ordered Yiming to fetch his sandals, which drifted into the river. The young grandmother was very disappointed with her daughter Dexin's attitude and vowed to regret giving birth to her. Since then, Dexin has refused to talk to Sengson again. In order to seduce his sister, Sengson promises to stay with Dexin forever. A dozen years of not wanting to talk and continuing to endure mental pressure at home, Dexin grows into a mentally ill girl. He often rages alone in his room and screams hysterically as if he saw something terrible. The grandmother, who is the mother of the children, calls the shaman Akai to exorcise the demon in Dexin's body. The mentally ill girl rebelled loudly while asking for help from her twin sister Sengson. Unfortunately, because Sengson had just given birth and had a baby, Sengson chose to stay quiet and rest in the room. After seeing flashbacks of his past life, Sengson sees a man walking behind the door of the room. He went into his room where the most painful incident happened. At that time, Sengson's husband chose to leave Sengson. Dexin screamed behind the door, blaming his family for not saving his life from misery. Along with the photo of Dexin being hit by Grandma's slippers, the room started to shake so violently that Sengson had difficulty standing. After several punches, Akai said that Dexin's spirit had come. Zhaoqi crawled up and entered the room. Akai tells Grandma to keep beating on Dexin's photo and makes Zhaoqi whine in pain. Until finally, 45 hours 15 minutes, the ghost of Dexin who possessed Zhaoqi's body burst out. Asa manages to break the glass in the mirror and returns to his original world, while Sengson is trapped in the demon world. Asa immediately carried Zhaoqi and hid her under the god statue table. At the same time, the grandmother who was still with the shaman Akai started to be haunted. Dexin's ghost suddenly appears without a head and strangles his own mother's neck. Akai tries to attack and sends the ghost flying far into the wall. 47 hours 50 minutes 51. The demon crawls in the corner of the room where Akai says that Grandma's daughter is coming back to take revenge. The grandmother's forehead was hit by drops of blood, which turned out to be Dexin's ghost. Appeared again from the ceiling and again strangled her mother. When the grandmother was dying, the demon entered her mother's body to carry out an act of revenge. Akai runs scared, being chased by a demon-possessed Granny. Granny took a butcher knife to chop the shaman's body. Asa, who was hiding under the table, witnessed how sadistic the grandmother was to kill the shaman Akai. After he was satisfied tearing the shaman Akai's body apart, Dexon, who possessed grandmother's body, forced Eza to walk closer to the well. Dexon asked Eza to open the wooden cover on the well. If Eza didn't want to do it, then Dexon would not hesitate to kill the old woman by slashing her arm. With an axe, Eza smashed the log across the well. Sengson had sunk to the bottom of the well but was in a different realm. Eza went into the well and dug the ground at the bottom of the well. Eza found a cloth bundle with a spell written on it and carried it upstairs. Dexon told Eza to open the package, which turned out to contain Dexon's skull. Daochi, who was peeking from behind the door, was also shocked to see him. Seeing Dexon's skull, Eza had vision in the past. Shaman Akai is a trusted shaman who is assigned to heal Dexon. At that time Shaman Akai said that the day Yiming was born coincided with the death of the ghost of a woman who committed suicide in the river. Even though the shaman had tried to change Yiming's fate, grandmother's son had died. After trying hard to heal Dexon, the grandmother's daughter dies in a roundabout way when she falls into the well. Akai said that Dexon's body must be separated so that their remaining families can rest in peace. They forced Granny to chop off Dexon's body using an axe. Dexon's body had to be cremated and buried in the bamboo forest, while his head must be sealed at the place of death. Pieces of clothing, a lock of hair and a comb must be stored under Dexon's bed. The grandmother dared to decapitate the body of her own daughter who died in a roundabout plunge into the well. The girl's head rolled and rotted until only a skull remained. Eza came back to her senses after seeing all that happened. The grandmother, who was possessed by Dexon's spirit, paid her respects in front of the skull until grandma's forehead hit the ground hard. Daochi ran to stop her grandmother's dangerous actions, but Eza said that the woman was not Daochi's grandmother. Eza shouted at Dexon that the one who hurt Dexon was not the grandmother but the shaman Akai. Eza begged Dexon to let grandma's body go. He also offers help to Dexon's spirit if there is a wish that has not been carried out. Dexon requested that the body of his sister Sengson be buried with his body. Sengson's spirit trapped in the well begins to be terrorized by Dexon's voice. Dexon's spirit appears before his sister while explaining that he died in a well and his spirit was trapped there. Dexon asked his sister why she never helped when she needed help. Sengson never even cared about the fate of his own biological sister. Dexon showed what misery he had been enduring without anyone helping him. As it turned out, when Dexon was taken by the shaman Akai, the girl's body was tightly bound and fucked by a group of obscene shamans. After being raped many times, Dexon became increasingly frustrated that she cut off her own hair. Dexon asked who he should talk to while his brother didn't care. Dexon always sneaks into Sengson's room and wears his sister's clothes. He said that he always wanted to be Sengson, a child his parents would be proud of. Sengson cried knowing the reality that his sister had to endure. In desperation, Dexon plunged into the well wearing Sengson's white dress. Sengson continued to cry while apologizing to Dexon. He begged Dexon not to hurt his daughter Daochi, because the girl was innocent. Dexon said that he only used Daochi as bait to catch Sengson's spirit. So far, Sengson is a ghost whose spirit still haunts the house. Sengson argues with his mother after his husband leaves him. From that fight, Sengson accidentally fell into the well and his breath stopped. Dexon said they would always be together in their next life. In the morning, the police evacuated the body of the shaman Akai who was killed by Grandma. The old woman was arrested by the police on charges of murder and shamanistic fraud. Daochi and Eza perform a tribute ritual for the spirits of Sengson and Dexon according to Dexon's request. Eza talks to Sengson's spirit, that he will graduate from high school this year and continue studying in Keelung. Because Daochi's grandmother was in prison, Eza promised to protect and keep Daochi by her side. Eza and Zhangqi visit Grandpa, who is still in detention. The grandmother looked at Eza and called him Yiming, her eldest son. It seems that Yiming's spirit followed Eza and also visited Grandma. Zhangqi cried seeing her grandmother's attitude, who kept talking to Yiming without caring about her anymore. Grandmother said that her husband had left his wife and children to be with a servant girl at his house. It was not only her husband who was taken away, but the savings from Grandma and Mr. He were also taken by the servant girl. Grandmother said that her husband, Mr. He, died by his own gun because of the servant girl's spirit. 1:09:55. The servant girl always wondered why Master He left her. Granny was the one who tortured the maidservant at her house, who was having an affair with her husband, so that the girl was turned upside down by jumping into the river beside the house. After she left the haunted house, the spirit of the maid returned to inhabit the house to undergo karma until the house was branded as haunted by local residents. Eza and Zhangqi meet the healer who used to tell Yiming a fortune. The healer confirmed that his grandmother had met him decades ago. Grandma and Yiming both have the misfortune to do with water. Yiming can't avoid it and dies in a horrible way, while Zhangqi has the misfortune related to fire. The healer advised Zhangqi to get out and leave the haunted house because the house was unclean and filled with evil. Zhangqi immediately packed her things to live in the dormitory. And the movie ends a broken bar. The story, based on a real urban legend surrounding the Minxiong haunted house, has a profound impact on the community surrounding the house. It is so famous that many visitors come for sightseeing as well as testing their guts. From several people who visited, some of them saw a white shadowy figure flying in the house. There are various versions about the origin of this haunted house. This haunted house used to be a mansion with several family members living here many years ago. The well is known to be where a maid entered and committed suicide because of a forbidden affair with one of the young owners. It is said several other family members hanged themselves inside the house and another young maid was physically abused to death. Another version says that when the Japanese ruled Taiwan, some soldiers attacked an enemy they saw through the fog in the middle of the night, but they ended up killing their own soldiers by a mistake. This place is the most haunted house in Taiwan, whose horror can be proven by visiting there yourself. Thank you and goodbye.